What's up guys, Asian here again with another guide video. This time we'll be going over Veteran Maelstrom Arena. This is going to be the first video in a 10-part series of video. Just going over the entirety of Maelstrom Arena. I'll be showing you guys the spawn points, the bosses, what I use on my character in order to clear Maelstrom Arena. Hopefully this series of guides will help you guys clear Maelstrom Arena on your own, and you guys will be able to get onto the leaderboards. So just to start things off, I am doing this on my Magicka Sorcerer. My Magicka Sorcerer is probably the best class in order to clear Maelstrom Arena, just because they have very powerful shield. Magicka classes in general do better in Maelstrom Arena than stamina classes, because Magicka tunes do have access to a shield, while stamina tunes do not. So if this is your first time running Maelstrom Arena via vMA, I would highly recommend going with a Magicka Sorcerer if you have one already spec'd out. Pet builds in particular make vMA very, very easy. You don't need to have best in slot gear. You don't need to have the best DPS. I mean, there are DPS checks in vMA, but it's not like you need to pull 30k in order to be successful. To start things off, vMA is located in Hrothgar. You need to have access to the Orsinium DLC or have an active ESO Plus subscription. Maelstrom Arena is right here. You are going to have to discover it before you can port to it. As you can see here, you can port to it from any place in the map, just like you can recall to any other way shrine. You can also port to it from any way shrine that you've already discovered. Going over the gear here, this is a pet build. I don't normally go for high scores. With the changes made in Morrowind, the scores that I get normally are enough to put me on the leaderboards. Ever since the Morrowind patch has hit, less and less people have been doing vMA, and the scores have been generally lower, at least in the bottom half of the leaderboards. Again, I don't really go for score. This is just because this makes the run easier and a lot less of a hassle. So my gear here, I have a monster set. My monster set is Infernal Guardians. I have one heavy, one medium, both in Divines. You can use something like Lambris over here, or you can use something like Grothars. It really depends. I like Infernal Guardians because since I'll be using a lot of shield as a Magicka character, the proc will happen quite a lot, and it is very helpful, just because you're usually going to be wailing on one mob and other mobs will spawn away from you. So it is a good set to consider, because it will help you kill mobs that you won't be able to get right away. Since this is a pet build, obviously I'm using 5-piece Necropotence, and I'm using 3 Moondancer jewelry pieces. They are blue. You want Moondancer or IA. If you have access to Varnfell and have done Halls of Fabrication, the new trial, you can use, I believe it's called Master Architect. You want that Minor Slayer buff because vMA is considered a trial, so you will get that 5% DPS boost. For weapons, I have a vMA Lightning Staff and Sharpened, and I also have a Sharpened Moondancer Inferno Staff. Like I said earlier, you don't need best in slot gear in order to complete vMA. This is obviously a very spec'd out tune. You can clear this with Julianos, a monster set, willpower jewelry, and random sharpened staves. As long as you know the fight, as long as you know the mechanics of each stage, it is very possible to clear vMA using crafted sets and sets you can buy off the guild traders. While we're here, these are my stats. These are kind of the stats you want to shoot for if you want to do VMA or endgame content in general. 17,000 health with food, 45,000 magicka. This is with the Undaunted passive. If you don't have the Undaunted passive, you want to shoot for at least 40,000 magicka if you can. But 17,000 health is probably the bare minimum that you should be shooting for once you have all your passives unlocked. The bare minimum I would consider for, at the very least, vMA would be 16,000 health. The higher your health, the better. Don't be afraid to put attribute points into health if you do not hit that 16k, 17k health threshold, or even put health enchantments on your armor. Going over my bars here, this is a pet build. So obviously I have my Volatile Familiar, I have Aegis for some extra resistances, and it also increases my Max Magicka. Inner Light for the crit chance, and also Max Magicka increase. Shooting Star is the most powerful single target ultimate, so this is the one that I'm going to be using the most often. I obviously have my shield. If you are not a sorcerer, you can swap this out with Harness Magicka or Dampen Magic. I prefer Harness Magicka because it does restore your Magicka if you get hit by spells. And sustain ever since the Morrowind patch has become an issue. If you're not a Sorc, definitely use Harness Magicka. Elemental Blockade, obviously, since I'm using a vMA staff. Even if you don't have a vMA staff, you're going to want to use Blockade because it's a very powerful ground dot. Backbar, Destro ulti, it's very useful for bosses with adds. Some of the final bosses on some of these stages do spawn with adds, so if you throw down your Destro ulti, you can burn down the adds and the boss at the same time. Doesn't do as much DPS as Shooting Star, but that AoE, it's a very powerful ultimate nonetheless. Same three skills, you need to double bar them. Liquid Lightning is going to be your is the strongest ground dot in the game right now for Magicka tunes, or especially Magicka sorcerers. And if you're a Sorc, you definitely want to use Power Surge. The healing from Power Surge is more than enough to keep you alive during vMA. You could swap out Aegis if this is your first time running. You could swap it out with Twilight Matriarch. You can play it safe, get that burst heal for when your health starts to go down. But as long as you keep Surge up, you should not have any sort of health issues. Just keep Surge up, keep your ward up. You should be fine. In terms of CP distributions, I am not at the CP cap, so I am missing a couple of points here and there. This build, my CP distribution is for all endgame content to try to make it as generic as possible. Whatever setup I have here will work for most vet trials, so just keep that in mind. 75 into Arcanist, 75 into Tenacity. There's no point in putting 100 in Arcanist. I personally think it's a waste of 25 CP. You're only getting 1% extra Magicka recovery, which is only about 8-9 extra recovery at most. It's not worth the 25 points. Got some points in Mooncalf and Healthy just so I can spend the rest of those points. 25 into Warlord because you will be using Break Free a lot. You can see here I haven't quite hit that jump point. So I will be only getting a 10% reduction versus the 11%. It's important when you distribute your champion points that you do hit those jump points. You want to hit the smallest whole number possible. So right here, I've just put points in because I don't, just because I know I'm gonna eventually hit that jump point. And then tumbling to reduce the cost of dodge rolling. Again, dodge rolling, gonna be doing a bunch of that in vMA and endgame content, so you're just going to reduce that cost. Especially because as a Magicka tune, your stamina is already fairly limited. Under the Apprentice, I have 34 under Elfborn, 56 under Elemental Expert. Could put more points into Elfborn if you want. I wouldn't put more than about 50, whatever the closest jump point is to 50, just because due to the way that the CP points are very front-loaded post-Morrowind. Master at Arms, 21 points, Staff Expert, 19 points. I do play heavy attack builds with my Mag Sorc, which is why I have some considerably more points into Staff Expert versus Master at Arms. Just kind of to clear things up about direct damage, because I've heard a lot of questions about it in the past. Direct damage is any sort of ability that deals all of its damage in one hit. So things like Force Pulse, Crystal Frags, things like that count as direct damage. Anything that is a ground dot, Elemental Blockade, Endless Hail, if you're a bow user, Liquid Lightning, those are not considered direct damage. Some skills, for example, the Templar's Reflective Light or Vampire's Bane, have a direct damage and a damage over time component. With abilities like that, only that first direct damage hit is affected by Master at Arms. The damage over time component is not. Thaumaturge is going to be what increases your damage over time effects. I have 75 points here for the Exploiter passive. There's still kind of some debate whether Exploiter is the go-to for post-Morrowind DPS. For right now, keeping my exploiter passive, but it does require some more testing to see whether you can put points out of Thaumaturge and put them into Mastered Arms, Elfborn, or Elemental Expert. For your warrior CPs, I have 64 into Hardy and Elemental Defender. Make sure to put your points into these two first before you put points into Thick-Skinned and Ironclad. There is currently, don't know if it's intentional or not, but if you do it the other way around, you'll actually take more damage overall, even though you would think it remains the same. Again, Ironclad is direct damage, so anything that deals its damage in one blow. Post-Morrowind, this is a very powerful CP to put points into because enemies generally do direct damage attacks. There's only a handful of AoE damage over time effects that happen even in the endgame stuff. Even where there are damage over time effects, you're going to want to put points into Thick-Skinned just to kind of reduce that as well. And as a magic attune, you should also put points into Bastion to increase the size of your damage shields. Just helps improve your survivability. So that's it for kind of gear, CP distribution, skill bar setup, things like that. Just some general info about Maelstrom Arena. You'll see that Fan Nuit Hen has a quest marker over his head. You want to pick up the quest before you begin your run through Maelstrom Arena. If you do not pick up this quest and you happen to time out, you have to leave the arena for some reason, it will completely erase your progress once you leave Maelstrom Arena. If you pick up this quest, however, the game will remember your progress, save your progress, so you won't have to start all the way back from stage 1 again. So anytime you are doing Maelstrom Arena, make sure to pick up the quest, even if you're just going for score, going for a speed run, pick up the quest anyways. It's just makes a lot more sense to pick up the quest. Plus it gives you XP at the end, so free XP, why not? Tutor Riparius is a merchant. He will repair your gear. You can sell stuff to him. He sells basically potions, repair kits, lockpicks. He will spawn at the end of every stage, not at the end of every round. So between stages you can take the time to sell gear, you can take the time to repair your armor, things like that. Each stage in Maelstrom Arena has multiple rounds. There are 9 stages in total. The first 4 stages have 4 rounds each. The next 4 stages have 5 rounds each, and the last stage has 6 rounds. So that's stage 1 through 4 has 4 rounds, stage 5 through 8 has 5 rounds, and stage 9 has 6 rounds. Each of those rounds has a mini-boss, either put in the middle of the round or towards the end of the round. And the final round is the final boss for that stage. Each stage has its own unique mechanics that you're going to have to watch out for. It's normally a stage-wide mechanic, so it's kind of an environmental effect. It's not necessarily going to be a mob that is applying an effect on you, for an example. It could be like ground AoE that continually spawns. So whenever we start a stage, I'll kind of explain the stage mechanics, the special stage mechanics for you. Each round, you have access to 4 sigils. Sigils of Healing, Sigil of Haste, Sigil of Defense, and Sigil of Power. What they do is pretty self-explanatory. Healing gives you a heal over time, a lot like Regeneration or Mutagen. Haste increases your movement speed. Defense increases your resistances. It also reflects all projectiles, so it's basically like an infinite dragon scale. Except it also reflects arrows, so defense is a very powerful sigil to pick up if you think you're having trouble. And power just increases your spell and weapon power. On Vet Maelstrom Arena, you will get a score based on how quickly you clear the arena and how many times you die. You get 3,000 points for every round you complete, including the final round of each stage. When you complete a stage, you get 30,000 points. Every time you die, 1,000 points are taken away from your score. You have 15 lives. If you reach the end of the Maelstrom Arena with lives still remaining, you get 1,000 extra points for every life you have remaining. If you use a sigil during a round, you decrease your score by 750 points. So if you use, for example, 2 sigils on a round, you'll only get 1,500 points instead of 3,000 points when you finish that round. How long you take in the Maelstrom Arena also impacts your score. I'm not 100% certain how that component works. There seems to be sort of a cutoff time where if you go faster than a certain time, you get a bonus to your score. If you go slower than a certain time, you get a score deduction. So if you are trying to go for a leaderboard run, do keep that in mind. In general, speed and deaths are what's going to dictate your score. So try not to die, obviously, and try to kill things very quickly. That's pretty much it in terms of generic information. The next 9 videos are going to be each stage in Maelstrom Arena. I'll be going over the general strategy, the special stage mechanics, kind of go over what I do when I run Maelstrom Arena, just generally how to avoid dying, how to get a good score. This run is all going to be just one run through. I will shoot for a flawless, which is basically no death, but obviously that's not necessarily going to be the case. There is some RNG involved if you're trying to go for a flawless Conqueror achievement. So I'm just going to pick up the quest, and I'll see you guys in the next video.